This happened several years ago when a few high school buddies of mine and I decided that we wanted to get together and do our own kind of 10-year reunion celebration. We were never the cool kids, so we kind of just thought it would be a waste of time to even bother with a real reunion, and decided that a camping trip would better fit our interests. We had all kind of dispersed around the Midwest, so it was difficult to get all of the logistics sorted out, but my buddy Ray had family that lived out west in pretty much the middle of nowhere, but in a really nice, nature-laden part of the state. What was even better, they owned some remote land, and they were okay with us setting up our camp on their property so long as we didn't cause any damage to the natural formations. So it was an absolute win on our part. We set up the date and times and decided that we would all go out the first weekend in May and spend most of the week out in a really nice area, just enjoying the weather and the surrounding nature. I was honestly super excited to go on this trip, as I hadn't seen a couple of the guys since we graduated, though we kept in touch over things like Facebook. The logistics went like this. I was going to head out that way by car with my pal Joe. Ray and Mark were going to drive out together, and Brent was going to drive out with Dave. Basically, it was going to be a road trip with 2 of us per car, heading from different locations, and we had a hotel that we'd be staying in for the first night. We were all going to meet up there, then head out to the campgrounds, as that would just make it easier for everyone to go at the same time. Like I said, I was pretty psyched, as this was probably the most exciting thing I'd done in a long time, and I loved road trips. The drive there goes about as expected, fairly uneventful, with it pretty much just being a drive across parts of the Midwest, though the mountainous region was obviously gorgeous. I was the one driving for the first half, Joe for the second, and we got there in pretty good time considering how far it was. We were the second group to make it to the hotel, and the other guys, Ray and Mark, pulled in a few hours later. We all spent the night at a local bar catching up, playing pool, and just having a great night. After spending a few hours out and just enjoying ourselves, we opted to go ahead and call it a night and head back to our hotel rooms. When the morning rolled around, we had our fancy hotel breakfast of just add water eggs and microwave bacon, then all headed back onto the road. We followed Ray's car, and after about 45 or so minutes, we ended up in an area that pretty much seemed like the middle of nowhere. He parked and got out. Joe and I kind of gave him a look like, "Are you sure this is where we're supposed to be?" But he reassured us that he knew the area from when he spent the summer with his aunt as a kid. In the end, all we could do was trust him. We parked the cars and got all of our camping gear out, walked a couple 100 yards away until we had all decided that the spot was perfect, and started setting up. After a bit of time, we all got our tents set up. We decided to set them up with the 6 tents in a semicircle, all facing toward where we had parked the cars. Once night started rolling around, we set up our small pit and lit a fire, then all sat around and started reminiscing about our years in high school. It was probably one of the best nights I'd had in a long time, just sitting there with my old pals from high school, talking about the days when we were young, and then catching up on random things in our lives. What made it all the better was that the property owned by Ray's aunt was legitimately in the middle of nowhere. There were only dirt roads, no street lights, and no cell reception. It was probably around 10 or so when Brent pointed out that there was a car driving down one of the dirt roads. We all kind of sat there and watched it pass. It was pretty far away from us, but it was the only car that we'd seen all night. Ray laughed and said it was probably just one of the neighbors cutting through the back roads for whatever reason. He mentioned that the dirt roads over this way were used pretty much by the people that knew my aunt and people that were running illegal goods, mostly because the cops never came this way. Dave asked what kind of illegal goods, and as nonchalantly as he could be, Ray just said, drugs for the cartel. Obviously, we were all a bit shaken by that, but he didn't tell us that we were going to be sleeping on a cartel trail. He tells us that it's fine and that we didn't have to worry. His reasoning was pretty much that if they were running drugs across the area, they weren't going to pay them any mind because it would look more suspicious. They would just pass on by and keep going, never giving us a second glance. All we could do was trust him. After a couple more hours of chatting and drinking the beer we had brought, we all decided that it would be a good idea to call it a night. We all got into our tents, and I was struggling to fall asleep for some dumb reason. I was lying there for about half an hour, tossing and turning, and just generally feeling uncomfortable, when I noticed there was a light shining in the direction of our tents. I sat up and watched it get brighter and closer for a few moments, then it stopped moving. Within a few moments, the silence of the small forest was interrupted with the sound of a gunshot and a man yelling for all of us to get out of our tents. Inside, I was freaking out, obviously thinking about the cartel coming to rob us or murder us for being on their turf. In my defense, I was tired and a bit buzzed. He started shouting again that if we didn't get out of our tents, he was going to have to get us out, and that he had plenty of zip cuffs to make it happen, which was more than enough for me to get my ass up and open the door to the tent. I think the other guys were just as freaked out because everyone else exited their tent around the same time, everyone except Ray. We all got out, and in front of us was an old man holding a handgun in his right hand and a shotgun strapped to his back. It was pretty clear that he was in control of the situation and that he was going to be ready to take on any threats. I remember him saying something along the lines of, "I saw you boys out there a few hours ago. I gave you plenty of time to leave. Now we're going to have to do this the hard way." Before he unclipped his collection of zip cuffs, all of us were in mild panic, but apparently I was the only one that thought we should say something. "Wait, sir, we know who owns this land. We're not here to cause any trouble or anything. If we need to leave, we can find a new place to set up camp or go back to a hotel or something." He paused for a moment and looked over at me, then asked me how we knew the owner, and I tried to tell him that she was a family member of one of us, but he was still in the tent. At first, it looked like he didn't believe me, but after I pointed to the only closed tent and said that he was in there, he motioned for me to open the tent, then said, "Don't do anything stupid. You move wrong at all, and they'll be burying you out here." This statement made me all but piss my pants, but I moved over to the tent with my hands up and then slowly unzipped it. I tried to wake Ray up by saying, "Ray, get up. There's a crazy dude out here with a gun." Of course, he had more to drink than I did, and he was less than responsive. I whisper shouted it again, and after a few seconds, he finally opened his eyes. I told him that we needed him outside immediately because we were all about to die. He slowly and groggily sits up and then stands to get out of the tent. After a few seconds of taking in the scenes, he half drunkenly says, "Oh, hey, Mr. Carls, what are you doing out here?" The look on the old man's face changed completely. He went from murderous intent to looking like he just saw his own grandson for the first time. He quickly holstered his gun and stepped forward to give Ray a hug. After the tensions were a bit more settled, and we were done having our panic attacks, we learned who this man was. Ray told us that Mr. Carls was his aunt's next-door neighbor and had been for as long as they'd lived there, and apparently, the last time they'd seen each other, Ray was around 12. When we asked why he was creeping around on Ray's aunt's property, ready to put a new hole in anyone he saw, apparently his aunt was out of town and asked Mr. Carls to watch the property for trespassers, a job that the old man took very seriously. Also, his aunt had apparently forgotten to mention to the old man that we would be coming up for our camping trip. So when he saw our camp, he thought we were going to be there for a little bit and leave, which was a common thing for drifters. When he saw that we were still there, he apparently strapped up and decided that he was going to take us all into the sheriff's department himself, hence the sip cuffs. In the end, we stayed the full week and enjoyed the time together. Mr. Carls even came out to have a beer with us a couple times and brought us some food that his wife had made. Not exactly the norm for camping cuisine, but it was quite nice. I will say that as much as I really did enjoy this trip and hanging out with some of my old friends, having a gunshot right outside my tent and then pointed at my face because an old man thought we were trespassers has made it to where I really don't think I want to go camping again.